Commander Vathkrel stood on the bridge of the Time's Eternal Judgment asterisk, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic displays that surrounded him. The heavy cruiser had patrolled this sector of space for 3 cycles without incident. The Threshold Nebula stretched before them, its purple and blue gases swirling in the eternal dance of cosmic winds. This region marked the edge of Gen Collective territory, a border that had remained unchallenged for 200 years. "Commander, we have an unknown contact," announced Sensor Officer Talvin, her voice carrying a note of curiosity rather than concern. "Single vessel. Medium displacement. Emerging from the nebula's edge." Vathkrel moved to the tactical display with the fluid grace of his species. The Gen had ruled this region of space for millennia. Their empire stretched across 40 star systems, built on the foundation of superior technology and the doctrine of efficient warfare. When the Gen encountered a new species, the interaction followed a predictable pattern. The newcomers would recognize Gen's superiority, negotiations would commence, and another world would join the collective or retreat to their own space. "Visual confirmation," Vathkrel ordered. The main screen flickered, and the unknown vessel appeared. Vathkrel felt his crest flatten in disappointment. The ship looked primitive, almost crude, in its construction. The hull showed an odd patchwork quality, with sections that appeared to be different materials welded together. Compared to the sleek, elegant curves of Gen warships, this vessel seemed like something cobbled together in a scrapyard. "Analysis," Vathkrel said. "The vessel measures approximately 400 meters in length," Talvin reported. "Hull composition appears to be layered metals with composite reinforcement. Power signature is stable, but the configuration is unlike anything in our database. Weapons ports are visible along the dorsal and ventral surfaces." Engineer Salthos approached the command platform, his scanning device held in his primary manipulator. "Commander, permission to conduct a deep structural scan? This design is most unusual." "Granted," Vathkrel said. "Let us see what manner of species builds such a vessel." The deep scan took several minutes. As the data streamed in, Salthos made several small sounds of confusion. His secondary manipulators twitched, a sign of deep concentration among the Gen. "Commander, the readings are contradictory," Salthos said finally. "The hull armor is extraordinarily thick. I measure 17 layers of varying materials, with a total depth of nearly 4 meters in some sections. This is far beyond what would be necessary for a vessel of this size." Quote, "Perhaps they lack force-shielding technology," Vathkrel suggested. "That was my initial assessment," Salthos agreed. "However, I am detecting force field generators throughout the vessel. They possess the technology, but chose to maintain the heavy armor as well. Furthermore, nearly every system aboard the ship has redundant backups. The power plant alone has 3 separate emergency reserves." Vathkrel felt a stirring of interest. 3 backup power systems? Why would any species design such inefficiency into their vessels? Rieskesten surge. One of the tents de terre. HFY. "I cannot determine the reasoning, Commander. The ship appears, designed with the expectation that it will suffer catastrophic damage. There are isolated sections throughout the hull that can operate independently if the main vessel is compromised. The life support system has 7 independent networks." Intelligence Officer Cranell joined the conversation. "I have analyzed the vessel's energy output. The power signature suggests capabilities far exceeding what a ship of this size should possess. The reactor design is compact but generates enormous energy. If my calculations are correct, this vessel could sustain full combat operations for an extended period without refueling." Vathkrel studied the image of the strange ship. Something about it disturbed him in a way he could not quite articulate. The Gen had encountered hundreds of species in their expansion across the stars. Most were primitive, building clumsy vessels for their first tentative explorations beyond their home systems. A few possessed technology comparable to the Gen, but none had ever exceeded it. This ship, however, did not fit familiar patterns. "Hail them," Vathkrel ordered. "Let us introduce ourselves to this new species." The communications officer worked his console, transmitting on standard galactic frequencies. For several moments, there was no response. Then a calm voice spoke in fluent galactic standard. "This is Captain Jin Soo Park of the Earth vessel Times. Indomitable asterisk. We receive your transmission. Earth." The name meant nothing to Vothkrell. He activated the communication system. "Captain Park. I am Commander Vothkrell of the Gen Collective Heavy Cruiser Times Eternal Judgment asterisk. You have entered territory claimed by the Collective. State your intentions." "Commander Vothkrell. We greet you with respect," the human captain replied. The visual feed activated, showing a bipedal creature seated in what appeared to be a command chair. The being had only 2 eyes, 2 manipulators, and wore a uniform of dark blue. However, our records indicate this region of space was unclaimed when we surveyed it 6 months ago. Earth has established a scientific outpost on the 4th planet of the system designated Beta 7 in our charts. We have no hostile intentions toward the Gen Collective. Vothkrell studied the human. The being appeared remarkably fragile. The body structure suggested a species adapted to moderate gravity, possibly 12 to 13 standard units. The lack of protective carapace or natural armor indicated they had evolved as a prey species rather than predators. "Biometric analysis," Vothkrell said quietly to his crew. Crenell manipulated her console. The being registers as a carbon-based life form with an internal skeletal structure. Average lifespan appears to be approximately 60 to 70 standard years based on cellular degradation rates. Homeworld gravity is high, approximately 1.2 standard units. Atmosphere is oxygen-nitrogen mix. The species appears to have evolved on a world with significant environmental challenges. 60 years. The Gen lived for 300. This species had barely enough time to accumulate wisdom before death claimed them. And yet they had built a vessel that confused Gen sensors and spoke galactic standard as if they had been traveling the stars for centuries. "Captain Park," Vothkrell said, "your vessel's design is most unusual. Our scans suggest construction principles we have not encountered before." The human's face formed an expression that might have been amusement. "The Times. Indomitable Times represents Earth's approach to deep space exploration. Commander, she's built to bring her crew home no matter what happens. Your armor is excessive for a vessel operating in claimed space," Vothkrell observed. "In our experience, Commander, space is dangerous enough without adding territorial disputes. We prepare for every possibility." Vothkrell deactivated the communication temporarily. He turned to Salthos. "I want a complete analysis of that vessel. Every system, every design choice, every technical specification. Something about these humans troubles me." "I shall conduct the deepest scan our systems allow, Commander," Salthos promised. As the engineer returned to his station, Vothkrell gazed at the human ship on his display. In his 3 decades of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts. The Times. Indomitable Times appeared primitive on the surface. But the deeper they looked, the more questions arose. A species with a short lifespan had built a vessel designed to survive catastrophic damage. They claimed peaceful intentions but bristled with weapons. They spoke of scientific outposts, but their ship was clearly military in nature. The scan began in earnest, powerful beams of energy washing over the human vessel, penetrating deep into its structure. Somewhere in that ship's design lay answers to the questions forming in Vothkrell's mind. He did not yet know that those answers would shake the foundations of everything the Gen Collective believed about warfare, survival, and the nature of species that reached for the stars. The data flooded into the Times Eternal Judgment's times analysis computers at a rate that made Salthos work frantically to organize it all. Commander Vothkrell watched as the engineer's display filled with technical specifications, structural diagrams, and power flow charts. Each new piece of information seemed to deepen rather than resolve the mysteries surrounding the human vessel. "Commander, I must report several disturbing findings," Salthos said after an hour of analysis. His voice carried a tremor that Vothkrell had never heard from the veteran engineer. This vessel's design philosophy contradicts every principle of efficient spacecraft construction. Explain, Vathkrel ordered, moving to stand beside the engineering station. The medical facilities, Commander. They occupy nearly 8% of the total habitable volume. That is 4 times the standard allocation. The equipment is designed for severe trauma treatment. There are surgical theaters equipped to handle massive casualties, radiation treatment facilities, tissue regeneration units, biological contamination protocols. It is as if the humans expect their crew to suffer terrible injuries as a matter of routine. Vathkrel felt his crest rise in unease. Perhaps their species is more fragile than we assessed. That was my initial theory, Salthos agreed. However, the crew quarters contradict this. The accommodations are Spartan and minimal. Resources that could provide comfort have instead been allocated to armor, weapons, and survival systems. The humans have chosen to prioritize combat capability over crew welfare. Intelligence Officer Crenell approached with her own data tablet. Commander, the weapons systems present similar contradictions. Each weapon has multiple redundant firing solutions. If the primary targeting computer fails, there are backup systems. If those fail, there are manual controls that allow crew members to operate weapons directly. Some of the larger cannons can be fired using mechanical backups if all electronic systems are destroyed. Who designs a weapon to be operated manually in the age of computer targeting? Vathkrel asked. A species that expects all their automated systems to fail in combat. Crenell replied quietly. I have also analyzed the small craft bays, the Times. Indomitable Times carries 12 strike fighters in armored launch bays. These bays have independent power, life support, and can launch craft even if the main vessel has lost all power. The fighters themselves are compact but heavily armed. Vathkrel moved back to his command platform, processing this information. The Gen approach to warfare was elegant and efficient. Overwhelming force was applied at decisive points. When an enemy recognized the logic of their defeat, they surrendered. Combat rarely lasted more than a few engagements. Casualties were minimal, because most species chose survival over pointless resistance. But nothing about the human ship suggested they shared this philosophy. Crenell, can you access their computer systems? Vathkrel asked. I wish to know more about these humans. Commander, the humans have left certain databases unencrypted and openly accessible, Crenell reported. It appears to be a diplomatic gesture. They are allowing us to learn about them. Access their historical records, Vathkrel ordered. Find out what kind of species builds a ship like this. Crenell worked in silence for several minutes. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, with what might have been fear. Commander, you need to see this. Vathkrel moved to the intelligence station. The display showed text in the human language, with automatic translation running beneath. Historical records, dates, events. As Vathkrel read, a cold understanding began to settle into his consciousness. The humans called their homeworld Earth. It was a planet rich in resources, but harsh in climate, with extreme weather patterns and tectonic instability. Multiple species had evolved to intelligence on this world, but only one had survived: the humans, and they had spent their entire existence fighting. The records detailed conflicts stretching back thousands of years, wars between tribes, wars between nations, wars between continents. The humans had developed increasingly lethal weapons and used them against each other with terrible consistency. Projectile weapons, explosive devices, chemical agents, biological weapons, nuclear fission bombs. They used atomic weapons against their own species, Salthos whispered, reading over Vathkrel's shoulder. On their own homeworld, the records showed images of human cities reduced to rubble. Casualty counts in the millions. Entire generations of young humans killed in wars that lasted for years. Naval battles where thousands died in single engagements. Aerial combat, armored ground vehicles destroying each other across vast battlefields. This is their history? Vathkrel asked. Continuous warfare? For approximately 12,000 years by their reckoning, Crenell confirmed. They achieved spaceflight only 200 years ago. But their entire developmental period was marked by increasingly sophisticated warfare. They have fought on every terrain their planet offers. Oceans, mountains, deserts, frozen wastelands, underground, in the air. Vathkrel looked at the image of the times. Indomitable times on his display with new understanding. The thick armor, the redundant systems, the massive medical facilities, the manual weapon controls, none of it was primitive or inefficient. It was the culmination of 12,000 years of learning how to survive in combat. Pull up their military philosophy, Vathkrel ordered. I want to understand how they think. Crenell accessed more files. Quotes and doctrines appeared on the screen. Vathkrel read them with growing alarm. No plan survives contact with the enemy. The only easy day was yesterday. Pain is weakness leaving the body. Peace through superior firepower. Adapt. And overcome. These were not the philosophies of a species that believed in efficient warfare. These were the thoughts of beings who expected combat to be chaotic, painful, and prolonged. Beings who had learned that survival required preparation for the worst possible scenarios. Commander, I have found something else, Crenell said hesitantly. The humans have a saying that appears frequently in their military tradition. It is in an ancient language called Latin. What does it say? Si vis pacem, para bellum. The translation reads, if you want peace, prepare for war. Silence filled the bridge. Every jeune present understood the implications. The humans did not build warships because they loved war. They built them because their entire history had taught them that peace could only be maintained through the credible threat of overwhelming violence. The Time's indomitable asterisk, Vathkrel said slowly, is not a primitive vessel. It is a weapon designed by a species that has spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare against itself. Commander, there is more, Salthos added. I have analyzed their fleet composition based on the data they have made available. The Times, Indomitable Times, is classified as a patrol frigate. It is one of their smaller military vessels. Vathkrel felt something he had not experienced in decades. A cold sensation that his ancestors might have called dread. How large are their capital ships? Dreadnoughts measuring over 2 kilometers. Carrier vessels that transport hundreds of strike craft. Orbital weapons platforms. Strategic missile cruisers. And Commander, every vessel follows the same design philosophy. Redundancy. Survivability. Overwhelming firepower. Vathkrel returned to his command platform. He accessed the communication log of his conversation with Captain Park. The human had been polite. Even friendly. But now Vathkrel understood what lay beneath that courtesy. The humans had built the Times, Indomitable Times, expecting it might face destruction. They had sent it to the frontier anyway, crewed by people whose species had survived countless wars against itself. Assessment, Vathkrel said to his senior officers. Could we defeat this vessel in combat? Salthos and Crenell exchanged glances. Finally, Salthos spoke. Our vessel is larger and possesses superior weapons. In a direct engagement, we would likely prevail. Likely, the Time's Indomitable Times would not surrender when logic dictated defeat. Their history shows humans fighting even when victory is mathematically impossible. We would win, but they would damage us significantly, perhaps critically. Vathkrel looked at the human ship, sitting calmly at the border of Gen space. Captain Park had claimed peaceful intentions. But that ship, and everything it represented, told a different story. The humans had brought peace to their own world, not through enlightenment or evolution beyond violence, but by becoming so skilled at warfare that continuing to fight each other became suicidal. Now they had brought that expertise to the stars. Continue scanning, Vathkrel ordered. I want to know everything about this species. and prepare a detailed report for High Command. They need to understand what we have encountered. As his crew returned to their duties, Vathkrel stared at the Time's indomitable asterisk. Somewhere aboard that vessel, Captain Park and his crew went about their routines, probably unaware that they had just terrified one of the most powerful military forces in the sector. The humans had survived by learning to be the deadliest thing on their world. Now, they had come to space, bringing those lessons with them. And Vathkrel had the terrible feeling that the galaxy was not prepared for what that meant. Commander Vathkrel transmitted his report to Zhen High Command with a sense of foreboding. He had included every detail about the human vessel, every disturbing element of their history, every implication of their military philosophy. He had recommended a cautious diplomatic approach, suggesting that the humans represented a species unlike any the collective had encountered before. The response arrived within 6 hours. Vathkrel read the orders with sinking dread. High Command believes you are overreacting to a single, primitive vessel, his second officer Ralken said, reading from the same transmission. They order us to assert collective dominance and force the humans to withdraw from disputed territory. They did not read my full report, Vathkrel said bitterly. Or they read it and did not understand. The orders are clear, Commander. We are to perform aggressive maneuvers and establish weapons lock on the human vessel. If they do not retreat, we are authorized to disable their ship and claim it as salvage. Vathkrel looked at the tactical display. The Times, indomitable Times, maintained its position at the nebula's edge, making no threatening moves. They were simply there, claiming space for their species as countless others had done throughout history. But the humans were not like other species. Tactical. Bring us to combat approach vector, Vathkrel ordered reluctantly. Helm, angle us to establish firing superiority. Weapons, achieve target lock, but do not arm firing sequences. The Time's eternal judgment Times moved with the grace of a predator, its massive bulk turning to present its heaviest weapons toward the human frigate. On the display, targeting solutions appeared as the Zhen computers calculated firing angles for every weapon system. We have achieved weapons lock, Commander, the tactical officer reported. The human vessel is powering up its defensive systems. Open a channel, Vathkrel ordered. Captain Park's face appeared on the screen. The human no longer showed the pleasant expression from their first contact. His features had hardened into something unreadable. Commander Vathkrel, Park said calmly. Your weapons are locked onto my ship. Is this your standard diplomatic protocol, Captain Park? I am ordered to secure this territory for the Zhen Collective. Your presence here is unacceptable. You will withdraw immediately. We've been through this, Commander. This is unclaimed space. We have a scientific outpost on Beta 7, with 60 researchers. I will not abandon them. On the tactical display, Vathkrel watched as the Time's Indomitable's Times crew moved to battle stations with practiced efficiency. The frigate's weapons came online, targeting systems acquiring the Zhen cruiser. Shield generators hummed to full power. The strike craft bays opened, and small fighters began pre-launch sequences. Your vessel is outnumbered and outgunned, Vathkrel said. Logic dictates withdrawal. Something that might have been a smile crossed Park's face. It was not a pleasant expression. Commander, in our first conversation, I told you the Times, Indomitable Times, is built to bring her crew home. Let me be clear about what that means. If you fire on this ship, we will return fire. We will not surrender. We will not retreat. We will fight until either your ship or mine is destroyed. Is that clear enough for you? Salthos leaned close to Vathkrel and whispered urgently. Commander, I have run combat simulations. Our probability of victory is 78%. However, the simulations project we will suffer 40% casualties, even in a successful engagement. The humans will not stop firing until their vessel is completely destroyed. 40% casualties. In the entire last war the Zhen had fought, total casualties had been less than 10%. Enemies saw the logical conclusion and surrendered. But the humans were showing every sign that surrender was not part of their thinking. I have accessed more of their historical database, Crenell added quietly. Commander, the humans have a tradition of last stands, battles where small forces fought to the death against overwhelming odds. They celebrate these defeats as great moments in their history. They teach their children about warriors who died rather than surrender. Vathkrel felt his crest flatten in disbelief. They celebrate defeats? Not the defeat itself, but the courage to fight impossible battles. There is an ancient human battle called Thermopylae. 300 warriors held a mountain pass against hundreds of thousands. All 300 died. The humans still remember their names thousands of years later. That is insane. That is humanity, Commander, Crenell said softly. They do not think like we do. The concept of logical surrender does not exist in their military culture. On the screen, Captain Park waited patiently. Around him, the human crew moved with quiet competence. A young officer checked weapon status. Another monitored the shield generators. Their faces showed determination but not fear. Captain Park, Vathkrel said slowly, I have studied your history. Your species has fought countless wars. You have developed weapons of terrible power. Why do you continue to prepare for war when you claim to seek peace? Park's expression softened slightly. Because we learned a hard lesson, Commander. Peace is not the absence of violence. Peace is the result of being strong enough that others choose not to attack you. We spent thousands of years fighting each other before we finally understood that. Now we're united as a species. But we remember what it cost to get here. We remember what happens when you're not prepared. And if I fire on your vessel, then you'll learn another human tradition, Commander. We don't start fights, but we finish them. Vathkrel muted the communication. He turned to face his bridge crew. Opinions. Speak freely. We can destroy their vessel, the tactical officer said. But they will hurt us badly in the process. And their outpost will send word to their homeworld. We will have started a war with a species that has spent its entire existence learning how to wage war. High Command expects us to enforce collective authority, Ralken said. If we back down from a single primitive ship, it shows weakness. That ship is not primitive, Salthos insisted. It is the product of a species that survived by becoming the most dangerous thing on their planet. Every system aboard that vessel was designed by people who learned through blood and death. Our elegant efficiency has never faced an enemy who expects to take damage and keeps fighting anyway. Vathkrel reactivated the communication. Captain Park, I wish to understand something. Your vessel's name is Time's Indomitable Asterisk. What does this word mean in your language? See, it means unconquerable, Park replied, unable to be defeated or subdued. And you believe this describes your vessel? I believe it describes my crew, Commander. The ship is just metal and systems. But the people aboard her have inherited 12,000 years of human determination. We will not be easily defeated. We will not be subdued. And we will not abandon our people on Beta 7. Vathkrel studied the human captain. Park was not boasting. He was simply stating what he believed to be fact. The humans had named their warship after their own refusal to surrender. They had built it to take terrible damage and continue fighting. They had crewed it with people whose entire cultural history celebrated fighting impossible battles. And they were prepared to do exactly what their history suggested. Then their species would learn what the Gen could do, adapt to counter it, and return with greater force. I am withdrawing my weapons lock, Vathkrel said suddenly. Stand down from battle stations, Captain Park. Surprise flickered across the human's face. Commander, I am recommending to High Command that we negotiate borders rather than enforce them militarily. Your outpost on Beta 7 may remain. In exchange, Earth will recognize collective authority in the adjacent sectors. That seems reasonable, Commander. I'm authorized to discuss territorial agreements. However, Vothkrel continued, I have one request. I wish to understand humanity better. Will you allow a diplomatic exchange? My intelligence officer aboard your vessel, and one of your officers aboard mine? Park considered this. I can agree to that. We'd like to understand the Gen better as well. Ambassador Chen Wei is traveling with us as an observer. She can begin negotiations immediately. Excellent. I will prepare quarters for your ambassador. The communication ended. Vothkrel sat heavily in his command chair. Around him, the bridge crew visibly relaxed. Commander. Was that wise? Ralkan asked quietly. High Command will not be pleased. High Command ordered me to force their surrender. Vothkrel replied. I have instead achieved a diplomatic solution that gives the collective control of 70% of the disputed territory. If they wish to criticize that result, they are welcome to come here and fight the humans themselves. He looked at the Time's indomitable asterisk, now standing down from battle stations. The human vessel had proven its point without firing a shot. They were prepared for war, but preferred peace. Strong enough to fight, but wise enough to negotiate. It was a combination the Gen had never encountered before, and Vothkrel knew that the galaxy had just changed in ways that few yet understood. The diplomatic exchange happened within 2 days. Avertine Feith, Rentapras, Vothkrel knew that the galaxy, and Feithri, and Fiverminter, Crenell transferred to the Times, Indomitable Times, while a human officer named Lieutenant Sarah Kim came aboard the Times Eternal Judgment Asterisk. Both vessels maintained respectful distance, while their representatives began the careful work of understanding each other. Vothkrel met Lieutenant Kim in one of the observation lounges. The human was smaller than he had expected, barely reaching to his mid-torso. Even with him standing on all 4 legs, she wore the same dark blue uniform as Captain Park, with various insignia that presumably indicated rank and specialty. Commander Vothkrel, Kim said, inclining her head in what must have been a gesture of respect. Thank you for hosting me. Your vessel is impressive, as is yours, Lieutenant. Please, sit. I understand humans prefer chairs. A seat had been prepared, and Kim settled into it with apparent gratitude. Vothkrel noticed she moved with the easy grace of someone comfortable in the higher gravity of his ship. The humans had evolved on a heavy world. Their bodies adapted to forces that would exhaust most species. I will be direct, Vothkrel said. My species has encountered hundreds of civilizations in our expansion across the stars. None have disturbed me as much as humanity. I wish to understand why. Vothkrel. Kim nodded slowly. You scanned our ship. You read our history. I imagine it raised questions. Many questions. Your species spent thousands of years in continuous warfare. You developed weapons capable of destroying your own world. Yet you claim to seek peace. How do I reconcile these contradictions? It's not a contradiction, Commander. It's a lesson learned through terrible cost. Kim leaned forward. Do you know what the deadliest conflict in human history was called? World War II. 60 million people died. Cities were reduced to ash. We used atomic weapons for the first and only time against each other. When it was over, humanity looked at what we had done and made a choice. What choice? Never again. We created international laws, formed global organizations, established rules of warfare. We didn't stop being capable of violence. We learned to control it, channel it, use it only when absolutely necessary. Vothkrel considered this. But you still maintain enormous military forces. Your ship is designed for warfare, not exploration. Because we learned another lesson. Kim replied. Peace must be defended. There are always those who see kindness as weakness, diplomacy as cowardice. So we stay strong. We prepare for the worst. We build ships like the Times Indomitable Times, so that when we offer peace, others know we could have chosen war instead. This is what your people call Deterrence. Exactly. The best fight is the one that never happens because both sides know how badly it would end. A message chimed on Vothkrel's communication device. He read it with sinking comprehension. It appears we are about to test your philosophy of deterrence. Admiral Korveth has arrived with a battle group. He is demanding that all human vessels withdraw from this sector immediately. Kim's expression hardened. How large is this battle group? 3 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and support vessels. The Admiral is known for his aggressive enforcement of collective authority. Commander, I need to return to the Times. Indomitable. Asterisk. Of course, but Lieutenant, please understand. Admiral Korveth is not like me. He has won every engagement he has commanded through overwhelming force. He will not be impressed by human resolve. Kim stood. Then perhaps it's time he learned that resolve is sometimes more important than force. She was transported back to her vessel within minutes. Vothkrel moved to the bridge, where Admiral Korveth's face dominated the main screen. The Admiral was older than Vothkrel, with a crest marked by scars earned in 2 decades of military service. Commander Vothkrel, Korveth said without preamble, I have reviewed your report about these humans. I find your concerns overblown and your recommendations weak. You will join my battle group in forcing these primitives to retreat from collective space. Admiral, with respect, the humans are not primitive. They are a species that has mastered warfare over thousands of years. They will not retreat simply because we outnumber them. Then they will be destroyed. Their foolishness is not our concern. On the tactical display, Vothkrel watched as more human vessels arrived through the nebula. The destroyer, Times. Resilience asterisk. The cruiser Times, Tenacious asterisk. And the frigate Times, Defiant asterisk. Each ship took up position in a defensive formation that spoke of careful planning and practiced coordination. Admiral, the humans are reinforcing. 4 vessels now. Irrelevant. We outnumber them 3-1 and possess superior firepower. They will see reason or be eliminated. But as Vothkrel studied the human formation, he saw something that troubled him. The vessels were positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. Each ship's weapons covered gaps in the other's defenses. They had created a formation where attacking any single vessel would expose the attacker to concentrated fire from multiple directions. Admiral, I am detecting additional contacts, the sensor officer reported. Multiple small objects deploying from the human vessels. What are they? Crenell's voice came over the communication channel from the Times Indomitable asterisk. Commander, I am authorized to inform you that the objects are defensive weapons platforms. Each platform carries multiple missile systems with high-yield warheads. Captain Park wishes you to understand, this is a defensive deployment only. Korveth's crest rose in anger. They dare deploy weapons while under threat of attack? This is an act of aggression. No, Admiral, Vothkrel said quietly. It is deterrence. They are showing us what attacking them would cost. I do not fear their primitive weapons. Perhaps you should. Vothkrel pulled up the analysis Crenell had compiled during her time on the human vessel. These weapons platforms use what humans call pattern recognition systems. They track multiple targets simultaneously and coordinate their fire. Each missile can adjust its trajectory mid-flight to counter defensive maneuvers. And Admiral, the warheads are fusion-based. A single hit could cripple a destroyer. We have point defense systems, as do they. The difference is that humans designed these weapons expecting them to face point defense. They use overwhelming numbers to ensure some missiles reach their targets. It is the same philosophy as their ship design. Redundancy. Multiple paths to the same goal. Admiral Korveth studied the tactical display in silence. Vothkrel could see him calculating, analyzing. The Zhen battle group could certainly defeat 4 human vessels, but the cost would be significant. Multiple ships damaged. Casualties in the hundreds. Perhaps thousands. And for what? To claim a disputed territory that had been empty before humans arrived? I wish to speak with the human commander, Korveth said finally. Captain Park's face appeared on the screen. Calm, despite facing overwhelming force. Admiral Corveth. I'm Captain Jin-Soo Park, commanding the Earth Defense Group in this sector. You are outnumbered and outgunned, Captain. Withdraw now and avoid unnecessary bloodshed. I appreciate your concern for bloodshed, Admiral. Let me be clear about our position. We have 60 scientists on Beta 7, conducting legitimate research. We have no hostile intentions toward the Gen Collective. We are willing to negotiate borders and establish protocols for shared space. What we will not do is abandon our people or retreat from territory we surveyed and claimed, according to established galactic law. You speak of law to justify defying the collective. I speak of law because it's the foundation of civilization, Admiral. You claim this space is yours, but your own charts show it was unclaimed when we arrived. If the collective wishes to dispute our claim, there are diplomatic channels for that. But if you choose to enforce your claim through violence, we will respond in kind. Corveth's expression showed disbelief. You would fight a battle you cannot win? We would fight a battle that would cost you more than this territory is worth, Park replied. Admiral, I've read about the Gen Collective. You're an ancient civilization with a proud military tradition. You value efficiency and logic. So let me appeal to that logic. If you attack us, you'll win. Your forces are superior, but we'll destroy at least one of your heavy cruisers and damage several more. We'll inflict casualties in the thousands. And when we're gone, Earth will know exactly what happened here. They'll know what weapons you used, what tactics you employed, what vulnerabilities we exploited. And they'll prepare accordingly. And as for, you threaten us with future retaliation? I'm explaining consequences, Admiral. Earth has 300 ships like mine, 50 capital ships, defense stations around every colony. We've spent 2 centuries building our fleet because we learned what happens when you're not prepared. You can destroy this battle group, but you cannot destroy humanity. And once Earth knows the collective is hostile, you'll face an enemy that has spent 12,000 years learning how to fight wars of survival. Vothkrell watched the Admiral's face carefully. Corveth was processing this information, running calculations. The humans were offering him a choice. Win a single battle at terrible cost and start a protracted war, or negotiate and gain most of what the collective wanted without bloodshed. Commander Vothkrell, Corveth said, your analysis of human capabilities, is it accurate? Every word, Admiral. The humans are not bluffing. They will fight to the death because their entire history has taught them that survival requires absolute commitment. Long silence filled the channel. Then Corveth spoke again. Captain Park, I will accept your offer of negotiation. We will establish a neutral station where our diplomats can discuss borders and protocols. But understand this. The collective does not tolerate aggression in our territories. If humans violate the agreements we reach, the consequences will be severe. We understand completely, Admiral. Earth honors its agreements. We'll send Ambassador Chen Wei to represent us. I think you'll find her reasonable. The communication ended. Corveth turned to Vothkrell. Commander, you will coordinate with the human vessels to establish the negotiation parameters. I will report to High Command that we have achieved diplomatic resolution of the territorial dispute. Yes, Admiral. As Corveth's face disappeared from the screen, Vothkrell allowed himself to relax slightly. A war had been averted, not through superior force or clever tactics, but through the simple mathematics of cost versus benefit. The humans had made destroying them expensive enough that negotiation became the logical choice. It was, Vothkrell realized, exactly what deterrence was supposed to accomplish. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Ambassador Chen Wei proved to be exactly what Captain Park had promised, a reasonable diplomat who understood both the art of compromise and the importance of standing firm on essential points. The final agreement gave the Gen Collective authority over 70% of the disputed territories while recognizing human claims to the systems where they had established outposts. Vathkrel attended the signing ceremony aboard a newly constructed neutral station at the border between human and Gen space. He watched as Admiral Korveth and Ambassador Chen placed their marks on the treaty document, officially ending the crisis that could have sparked an interstellar war. "Commander Vathkrel," Chen said after the ceremony, "Captain Park has requested that you visit Earth. Our government wishes to establish formal relations with the Gen Collective. We believe your understanding of both our peoples makes you an ideal candidate to lead the initial exchanges." "I am honored by the invitation," Vathkrel replied. "I must admit, I am curious to see the world that produced such a remarkable species." 6 months later, Vathkrel stood in the observation deck of a human transport vessel as it approached Earth. The planet hung in space before him, a sphere of blue water and white clouds. He had studied images of this world, but seeing it directly still moved him. This small planet, with its violent weather and unstable geology, had given birth to humanity. Beautiful, isn't it? Captain Park stood beside him, wearing the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. He had been promoted after the successful resolution of the border crisis. "It is remarkable," Vathkrel agreed. "But I confess I do not understand. This world appears peaceful. How did such a place create a species so skilled in warfare?" "Come with me," Park said. "I want to show you something." They took a shuttle to the surface, landing at a facility park called a military museum. As they walked through the exhibits, Vathkrel saw the entire history of human warfare laid out before him: ancient weapons of stone and bronze, medieval swords and armor, firearms that had grown increasingly lethal over centuries, tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels, and finally, the weapons of space. Each exhibit was marked with casualty counts and dates. "This is the Battle of Gettysburg," Park said, stopping before a large display. "A battle in our American Civil War. 50,000 casualties in 3 days. This is the Somme, from World War I. 1 million casualties over 4 months. Here is Stalingrad from World War II. 2 million dead in a single city." Vathkrel stared at the numbers. These battles killed more than most wars in collective history, and they were just individual battles in longer wars. Park said quietly, "We did this to ourselves, Commander. For thousands of years, we killed each other with increasing efficiency. We developed chemical weapons that dissolved lungs, biological weapons that spread plague, nuclear weapons that could level cities. We fought in jungles, deserts, frozen tundra, on land, sea, air, and eventually space. We learned every possible way to kill and destroy. Why show me this? Because you need to understand what you saw when you scanned the Time's indomitable asterisk. That ship isn't the product of military genius or superior technology. It's the product of necessity. Every redundant system, every armor plate, every backup weapon exists because at some point in our history, we learned what happens when those things aren't there. We built our warships from the lessons purchased with blood." They moved to another section of the museum. Here were displays about peacekeeping, international cooperation, and space exploration. Images of humans from different nations working together, building orbital stations, exploring their solar system. "But we also learned something else," Park continued. "We learned that the species that survives is the one that can stop fighting itself and turn that energy toward common goals. We learned that strength and compassion aren't opposites. We learned that the best warrior is the one who never has to fight. Yet you maintain your military forces. Because we also learned that peace is fragile, Commander. It must be protected. There will always be those who see cooperation as weakness, who believe might makes right. So, we stay ready. We build ships like the Time's indomitable asterisk. We train our people for conflict we hope never comes. And when someone like Admiral Korveth appears, ready to take what isn't his, we're prepared to make him reconsider." Vathkrel understood now. The humans weren't warlike. They were survivors who had learned that survival sometimes required the capacity for terrible violence. But they had also learned to control that capacity, to use it as a shield rather than a sword. The collective leadership is still processing what your species represents, Vathkrel said. Some see you as a threat. Others see potential allies. I believe most simply, do not know what to think. That's fair, Park said. We're still figuring out our place in the galaxy ourselves. But I can tell you what Earth hopes for. We hope to find friends among the stars, partners in exploration and discovery, species we can learn from and teach in return. We've spent too long fighting ourselves to want to fight the universe too. And if conflict finds you anyway, Park's expression hardened slightly, then we'll do what we've always done. We'll survive. We'll adapt. We'll find a way to win. But we'll also look for the path back to peace, because that's what we truly want. Over the following weeks, Vathkrel toured Earth's major cities and met with their leaders. He saw a world that had unified itself through painful lessons, where former enemies now worked side by side on projects that benefited all humanity. He met soldiers who trained for war, but hoped for peace, scientists who developed weapons but preferred to explore, diplomats who negotiated from positions of strength but sought common ground, and he began to understand what humanity would bring to the galactic community. The Zhen Collective formally established diplomatic relations with Earth 3 months later. Trade agreements followed, cultural exchanges, joint scientific projects, and quietly, military observers from both sides began studying each other's tactics and technologies. Vathkrel found himself leading a combined patrol group, human and Zhen vessels working together to secure their mutual borders. Captain Park served as his strategic advisor, teaching Zhen officers the principles of human military doctrine. Your people are adapting quickly, Park observed one day as they reviewed training exercises. The Zhen always relied on overwhelming force and logical threat assessment, but now you're incorporating redundancy, planning, and survival-focused design. Because you taught us that logic is not enough, Vathkrel replied. An enemy who refuses to surrender when logic dictates defeat cannot be handled by traditional doctrine. We are learning from you, and we're learning from you. Zhen efficiency and precision are remarkable. Our engineers are incorporating some of your design principles into our next generation of vessels. Maybe together we can create something better than either of us could alone. That evening, Vathkrel sat in his quarters and recorded a personal log entry. It was something humans did. He had learned. A way of processing thoughts and preserving perspective. When I first scanned the Time's indomitable asterisk, I saw a primitive vessel that confused my sensors and contradicted my understanding of efficient spacecraft design. I was wrong. I was seeing the culmination of 12,000 years of brutal lessons in survival. I was seeing a species that had learned to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. I was seeing humanity. The humans do not love war. They have simply survived it so many times that they have become masters of it. Their warships are not weapons of conquest. They are monuments to survival, built by a species that refused to surrender to extinction. Every redundant system, every armor plate, every weapon exists because humans learned what happens without them. But the most profound truth about humanity is this: they extended friendship to us, even after proving they could be deadly enemies. They negotiated in good faith, even while prepared for war. They showed us that true strength is not the willingness to fight, but the wisdom to choose peace when both options are available. The galaxy is not prepared for humanity, but perhaps it needs them anyway. Perhaps we all need a reminder that survival is a choice, that peace must be defended, and that the greatest warriors are those who fight only when necessary. I scanned a human warship, and what I beheld shook me to my core. I saw humanity's capacity for violence and survival. But I also saw their capacity for growth, cooperation, and hope. The humans have come to the stars, bringing both their sword and their dream of peace. The galaxy is better for it. Vathkrel closed the log entry. Through his viewport, he could see both Gen and human vessels patrolling in formation. Once strangers, now allies. The Times, indomitable Times, held position at the formation's center, its weapons ready but silent, its crew vigilant but at peace. It was, Vathkrel thought, exactly what humanity had always wanted: to be strong enough that no one dared attack them, to be capable enough that everyone respected them, to be wise enough to know that the best battles were the ones never fought. And watching that formation, Gen and human vessels working as one, Vathkrel understood that humanity had not just survived their violent past. They had transcended it, without forgetting it. They had learned to carry both their capacity for war and their hope for peace, understanding that both were necessary for survival among the stars. The humans had indeed come in peace, but they had brought their warships anyway, just in case. And the galaxy, slowly learning what that meant, was beginning to respect them for it. The Times, indomitable Times, and ships like it would patrol the borders of human space for generations to come. Silent guardians carrying the hopes of a species that had learned the hard way that peace was worth fighting for. That survival required preparation. That true strength came not from the willingness to fight, but from the wisdom to know when fighting was necessary. Humanity had scanned their own history and learned its lessons. Now, they had brought those lessons to the stars, and the galaxy, whether it knew it or not, was already beginning to change because of them.